Thanks, all of you, for being here. And it's amazing to see human beings in a public space. So it's great that this is happening just so we can enjoy that. All right, let's get you folks to introduce yourselves, and then we'll go to it. Steve, you want to go first?
Sure. We have to get all the Steves out of the way.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Zwerin. I'm Director of HR Investigations for the City of Seattle. And I lead a wonderful team that conducts EEO investigations for 13,000 employees. I also wanted to point out that I have a little computer next to me. I'm legally deaf and read lips, and that's kind of hard to do in a panel like this, so I have a little Zoom call going with the captions on there. So if you see me looking at something, that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Benwallos. I'm Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity and Workforce Development at Kaiser Permanente, Washington. And Kaiser Permanente, Washington is the 8th newest market of our organization, and our headquarters is located in Oakland, California. And we provide healthcare plans for over 700,000 members, and our goal and mission is to improve healthcare to our members.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Cassandra Mitchell, Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Strategy and Engagement, very long title, at KeyBank. I've been with Key for over 10 years now, and we are headquartered in Cleveland, Ohio, and I would consider us a super regional bank. So we are located in 15 states across the US, and yeah, I'm just happy to be here again in person. So it's great to see people in this type of setting. So I'm just excited to be here and learn from fellow panel members.
Thank you. My name is Madhukar Govindaraju. I'm the CEO of Numbly. We are a 2.5-year-old startup. We are pioneering peer coaching and peer learning for organizations. And as everybody said, I'm too excited to be here because I've been a partner of both Kaiser and KeyBank at my prior company. And we worked well together, but more importantly, being here together with all of you, very excited.
Thank you all. Well, let's start with that, since we are in a public space. Let's start with, how are your companies managing COVID? So how are your organizations responding to people still being out of office by helping them overcome any sense of isolation? Denise?
Excuse me. One thing that we're doing is we're providing a culture of inclusion through the variety of wellness programs, through our EAP that's available for our leaders. We make sure that they're available so that they can utilize those tools to reach out to those workers that feel that they're isolated. We also have opportunities to engage them in a variety of different ways. On our Zoom calls, we offer praise badges to make them feel that they're valued while they're on the team and in the meeting. And so others can see when they provide something that's valuable to the conversation. And we also have business resource groups that are available as another way, a network for employees to connect with if they feel like they want to relate to someone that more specifically that might address their needs. So we have a variety of different ways that we address that isolation.
Cassandra, what do you folks do?
Well, similar. It's been tough. It's been a rough couple of years. And so we've tried to create a safe space for our employees to have open conversation, to learn from each other, to help educate each other. I say we've been through, and we continue to go through, 2 pandemics, COVID and the social unrest and injustice. And so, we've created what we call social justice, racial equity conversations. We've hosted wellness, what we call Wellness and Thrive sessions and seminars and communications that go out on a weekly, actually monthly basis to remind folks of really just best practices, exercise videos. We implemented a fitness benefit. So anything that we can do to help with the emotional, mental, and physical strain that we've all faced over the last few years and continue to. And we're constantly looking at ways to improve. But a lot of it has been, whether it's large group conversations, hearing from an expert in the field, or small group conversations amongst teams. It's really just a matter of people coming together any way they can, knowing that it's all virtual, but just creating that safe space, more importantly, and providing the tools and the resources for people to be their authentic self at work and to come to work in the most healthy way possible, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. So I feel like we've done a really good job in creating and offering resources to help people succeed in that way.
And Steve, Thrive sessions, wellness, praise badges, have you heard from people at work that they do feel isolated, and are these sorts of steps helping?
These steps are definitely helping. I would say the biggest thing, the takeaway I would recommend on top of all of this is empathy. Empathy for your employees who are suffering, who are dealing with a lot. Empathy with people who have families, they have kids, they need to take care of elderly parents who are sick. Empathy goes so far in this time.
Mm-hmm. And Madhukar, what are you hearing from your employees? What works?
Yeah. So for us, we are the third pillar in the sort of the structure here. You can think of compliance and sort of the safe place as being the first two pillars for most companies, very critical pillars. But what we try to do, and we try to sip our own champagne within the company, and I'm also working with our customers on the same thing. The third pillar is about pivoting out of your traditional HR processes of learning and development, performance management, into truly helping individuals develop skills. And skills are not a random word. We had a panel earlier today talking about what it takes to reskill and create a culture of reskilling. We have to pare it down to your hard skills and soft skills. You have to pare it down to a structure where people can take the learning content, but most importantly, connect with people. So we focus on people connections and helping create a culture of coaching, which has many outcomes, and one of which is creating the safe place where people truly can work with each other without being worried about the next performance review or the next bonus cycle. I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to learn from each other and share with others within my organization. That's what we're trying to facilitate.
I want to come back to safe spaces and coaching, but let me, speaking of developing new skills and hard skills and soft skills, Steve, let me start with you. When people in organizations and departments ask for assistance regarding diversity, equity, inclusion, what are examples of appropriate responses?
Well, I have a 9-pointer here.
Oh, really?
I'll try to be quick. So, first is to listen. When people come to you with concerns, listen. People feeling heard will go such a long way. And somebody here talked about employee resource groups or business resource groups. Use them, hear what they have to say, and be willing to hear the hard stuff. Third is if you do a survey, and I recommend that you do, actually listen to what the employee feedback is and work with that. If there are problems identified, describe how you're going to fix it. Be transparent about that. I've talked about empathy. That goes a long way, especially right now where we're all suffering. Everybody's suffering from the bottom of the organization all the way to the top. And I talked about being transparent. If something is broken, don't just talk about how you can fix it, but what steps you're taking and actually fix it. Look at data across the organization. Where are your challenges? Where are your strengths? What can you work on to fix problems? And that's not just from one organization, investigation, but what are your trends across the company? And pay especially close attention to BIPOC employees. What's the data about them? Your hiring, your termination, your discipline numbers, and how you're going to fix that. And you should have DEI experts in your organization. If you don't have one, have some friends here on the panel who might have some recommendations. And last, hold people accountable. If you're seeing these issues, if problems are coming up and you're not holding people accountable, everything else that I've just said won't matter.
Well, what are the inappropriate responses that you get, Denise, when people, are asked or ask for assistance from leadership?
Well, our department is viewed by our employees as Switzerland. We're the neutral. They see us as neutral. They think that they're going to get the most honest response to their situation. And so even though they know that there's a process to file a complaint with our employee relations department or through our compliance department, they start at our department at times, not all the time, but at times. And sometimes it's because they're connecting with myself or my employee who has built a relationship with them. And so they want to start with, all right, what's the real deal? Who's going to give me the best guidance and how can I get my situation fixed? And so we'll entertain that. So what Steve said, a couple of things that Steve said resonated with me in terms of empathy. We listen, even though it's out of our scope, when it's clear that the employee's ask is to help for an employee situation. We still listen to them and hear their whole story. We're listening for clues of where there may be not necessarily a violation of policy, but a inclusive issue or lack thereof, or respect, or is it borderline on potential discrimination, microaggressions, or what other things that employees don't necessarily know the terminology to, but they're describing it. So we're assessing, and then we're passing it immediately on to our appropriate departments that investigate, which would be our employee relations department. So with all that, what would be inappropriate would be for our department to attempt to investigate that situation after hearing the story. All we're really doing is assessing, letting the person feel like they've been heard, because we are listening, and we're assessing potential EID interventions that will come back to us when the investigation is complete, because our employee relations department does work very closely with our department for EID interventions. And we have a couple up our sleeve to help them with that. So, so what's inappropriate is to work out of scope, essentially. And also to ignore and pass on, oh, that's not our department, and pass them on. That's not effective either, nor, in my opinion, appropriate.
Cassandra, is your group also seen as neutral?
Yes, the DEI team is. Similar to Stephen and what Denise said, same values, same perspective, same practices. I would add that we have, like I'm sure many organizations, very vocal employees who like to state their opinion very strongly, whether it's calling someone on the executive team directly, emailing them, or putting it on blast on our voice of the employee. But that's okay, right? We want to encourage everyone to speak their mind and opinion. When it kind of crosses the line, so to speak, we all group together, my team, the DEI team, HR, communications, we get together on how to effectively communicate a response, whether it's a response online, or it's a response from a senior leader. Our CDO will have one-on-one conversations with people who are very outspoken. Our chief of staff have also had direct one-on-one conversations with people. And sometimes that's needed. Again, at the end of the day, people want to be heard. People want to know that whether it's their opinion, perspective, whatever it is, people are hearing and listening to them. And so whether we agree with it or not, we allow that space. So that's how we handle those.
I mean, you touched on this, but
situations.
let's talk about holding people accountable
Yeah.
then. Well, Madhukar, let me start with you. How holding people accountable that is a loaded phrase. How do you do it? What are the best practices for holding people accountable?
Yeah, so before I answer that question, one of the things we do is talk to different people, groups within the companies, obviously HR leaders, You also talk to business leaders. But when you talk to members and leaders of your employee resource groups, suddenly something new comes out of those conversations. And what came out for us as we were researching around skills and everything was the fact that any kind of inclusion programs, D&I programs, never included the bottom 93% of the organization. How do you really bring that out? So to your point, to answer your question, what we find is everybody wants to be part of their organization. There is a natural feeling to be part. And as leaders, we need to enable that, create a forum. Be okay to doing certain things. You don't have to do it for compliance sake, or you have to do it because the CEO is requiring a new initiative based on diversity recruiting metrics. It's truly creating a sense of belonging within the organization. So that's what we heard. And I think what we're trying to do now is bring people and technology together towards that problem. It's not one or the other. We are all in the world of technology today, so you can't ignore technology. But at the same time, I grew up in a family of teachers, and my grandfather, who is no more, used to be my first mentor. We talk about mentoring a lot. But when mentoring becomes a process, a continuous process, where you can go to your mentor and talk about a problem of today, a problem of now, it becomes a coaching process. And so what we heard from the ERGs and many of the early customers we talked to is, there is no forum in companies for doing that. Managers are trained to be a coach, but they do it once a week during a one-on-one, and they're not really doing it because they want to do it. Or we don't have a place to go. I can't go and get my problems solved. When I'm in trouble, my manager is perhaps the last person I want to talk to. So what we heard was that people need forums, they need help and support. And now if we can enable that with whatever mechanisms, then it becomes really effective. And so for me, that's what excites me day to day when I talk to my own team at Numbly, as well as my customers and partners. What are they solving today? What is the problem? And how we can bring that to bear, right?
Let's follow up on accountability. Cassandra, is that good? Are those the steps you're taking as well, or are there other?
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking for the hammer. Where does the hammer come in accountability?
I believe in giving people grace. As long as something isn't egregious and they're not breaking a law, a lot of it comes back to, like I said earlier, people want to be heard, people have opinions, people want to share their thoughts and all the good stuff, bad stuff, whatever. And sometimes it's just a matter of giving people grace, giving them an opportunity to correct and learn, and going from there. And then, if there's anything around harassment, of course, we go through the normal process like any corporation does. But a lot of it is just that. Sometimes people don't know or understand the mistakes that they've made, didn't intend to make certain comments or anything. And so having the conversation, understanding the opportunity to learn and to grow, and of course it's a different conversation if it continues, but that's the approach that we've used, and it seemed to work so far.
Can you share one short story without violating anybody's confidence? Some aha moments you saw occur across the table?
There's a couple that come to mind. We have very strong, vocal, engaged employee resource groups. We call them KeyBanks, Key Business Impact Networking Groups. And our Pride group, very active and involved, and we have them in every market just about, and they send out communications, and part of just general awareness and education, we had one of our groups in Kansas City, I believe, send out information, just general information about pronoun use. Just here's the best practices of how to use pronouns. And there was an employee who did not appreciate getting that communication, and did not want to see those type of communications at a market level. And so we figured out who it was. We looped in HR, we looped in the market leader, and we identified the appropriate person to have a conversation with that individual. And honestly, it was just a matter of having a conversation and understanding that person's perspective, and our position on creating an inclusive and equitable work environment, and how those type of communications will always continue, and how we expect our employees to value our KeyBank values: teamwork, respect, integrity, leadership, and accountability, in how they do their work. And that's part of our overarching DEI strategy in influencing our employees who kind of push back when it comes to an example like that, and helping them understand that if you say you buy into our values, then that includes respecting everyone who's part of our team and across the market. So anyway, that's the most recent example that I could think of.
That's good. That's good. Thank you. All right, let me ask you about how these issues affect working relations, labor relations. So how do you discuss, let me start with you, Steve, and then Denise, how do you discuss these issues, these areas, inclusivity, diversity, where they might conflict with seniority issues, promotion issues in the workplace?
Sure. So I see that all the time in employment investigations. I mean, there's always that conflict of, we have a contract agreement that, if you are more senior than somebody else, you get promoted. Then you have other people, let's say, of the BIPOC folks, disabled folks, who believe that they're just as entitled to a position. So you have things like that come up and cause conflicts. And you have the everyday conflicts in the workplace of, I was more in, say, non-bargaining groups. I am more educated and skilled for this position. Why didn't I get it? And so these are challenges that you work with, and you're empathetic, you hear both sides, and you try to work through the solutions of, what comes first? Is it the bargaining contract? Have we done the right hiring or promotion process? And really just kind of work through that. Again, be transparent. Talk about what's working, what's not, and how to fix the issues that are coming up so people feel heard and valued. And ultimately, when you come up with your decision, they understand how and why you got there.
Denise, following up on that, but also, what tools do you have to move the recalcitrant groups towards the values, towards inclusiveness?
We just rolled out in 2021 Belong at KP, which is an enterprise-wide behavior program. It's a program, not a training, that is intended to change behavior. And it focuses on two parts. Part one is bias and understanding how bias can impact decisions. And the second part is dismantling racism. And so everyone went through part one. There are 3 modules for part one, where it's broken into understanding unconscious bias, microaggressions, what it looks like, how it shows up, and then respecting every voice. And so this is how we're trying to steer people who are not necessarily buying into the whole diversity program and our mission and values, is to break it down and have them understand what it means, how you show up, and what biases. If you have a brain, you have a bias. Everyone's born with it. It can be positive, it can be negative, and just breaking that down and understanding how your brain works and how it can be effective or ineffective in the way we do work. And so the way the program is designed is for the leaders and the employees to look at the session independently. They're an hour-long session, and then they come back at another day and they debrief. And so they get to talk about where they may have seen some of the behaviors that were highlighted in the program show up in the workplace. And the ultimate goal is for them to voice where they like it to stop if it's happening in their specific work group. And then ultimately identify where this might be showing up with our members. And so we want our employees to understand how this behavior is unacceptable, and then how it can impact our members if they don't understand that their behavior is doing that. So part 2 is rolling out this year in Q1. And that one's going to be a lot more sensitive, because we're, again, looking at how our systems, dismantling our systems and in anything that's creating a barrier to everyone having proper access to healthcare, and coming up with new ways to approach it so that we're more inclusive for our patients in getting access, and then also that they feel that they belong when they come into the clinics as well.
I see. So beyond the people working there,
Yes.
people you serve as well. Cassandra, unconscious bias, how do you address it?
Yeah, so about 9 years ago,
Go ahead. Let me come to you last. Let me ask Cassandra, because
Sure.
I'm going to go from unconscious bias to peer coaching. I had it all planned out.
yeah, no.
So Cassandra,
nine-
just
yeah,
give me
please.
unconscious. How
Okay.
do you address it, real quick?
I'll talk real quick. Similar to Denise, so we have an education and awareness program. We call it Building Bridges. It was the first kind of rollout of the training, and there's 3 modules. I'll call them modules. So building bridges, bridging the gap, and crossing the bridge. And the first one includes 8 kind of mini training sessions in bite-sized 15, 20-minute videos and readings and curriculum. One, we did it that way because reality is it's hard for our branch staff, for example, who are serving clients who come into the branch, to get any time away to take any type of training. So that format works for our environment. But we focused and really leaned into unconscious bias. The second was inclusion, and then the third, much more deeper, really get into systems and how we can unpack and create an anti-racist society. And so it's been a journey, but it's needed, and we encourage. The first one, it was mandatory. The other 2, strongly encouraged. We encourage small group discussions as well. It's not required, but the small group discussions is really what has the impact, right? Because people can go through the training, kind of check the box and add a side, add a mind, but being able to come back together as a team or cross-functional teams to really dig into what they learned, go through the curriculum. We've created guides to help our leaders have talking points to help facilitate conversations, because many of our leaders don't even know, or feel comfortable leading those conversations. So we've created toolkits for them. And we've just tried to make it as easy as possible for people to show up, have the conversation, learn from each other, and really be able to encourage them to just live the behaviors, right, and practice what they've learned. So far, it's worked.
So Madhukar, how do you use peer coaching to address the fundamental of unconscious bias?
Very good question. When you create, what we found, where Numbly started off with 2 years worth of research looking at what skills matter to people. We looked at professionals in different industries and verticals, and we looked at skills that matter for leadership development, skills that matter for inclusion and diversity. And it's so fascinating. Most customers we talk to, they have a D&I group and they have a learning and development group, which are sort of different. But 85 to 90% of the skills that matter for inclusion are the same as the ones that matter for developing leaders across the organization. The only lever you need to turn is create a program where you can engage everybody in the organization. To answer your question, we actually did this within our own company. We are still small, early stage growing, but we are a truly global company. On day 1, I signed 2 agreements. One is the Silicon Valley Leadership Group's 25-25 DEIB pledge to have at least 25% of my leadership team to be diverse. And we are not even at 25, we're at 100% today. And we said we will try creating leaders across the entire organization and really try to understand, is that including everybody? So Our peer coaching platform allows people to connect with anybody in the organization. About 10 years ago, I did an experiment partnering with my HR leader around reverse mentoring. I required my managers to do reverse mentoring with their teams. And we were the only organization that did it worldwide. And it was such a huge success. 10 years later, 21, we have flattened the reverse mentoring process and scaled it out. And that's what we call peer coaching. You can connect with anybody. In fact, we force managers to be learners with potentially coaches who are not managers within an organization. And they need not be peers from an HR organization hierarchy perspective. But when you become vulnerable and say, I want to learn from you, and you are a manager, that's the show of strength. And we have proven how skills matter for creating an inclusive culture, and how companies can actually scale a culture of inclusion by really helping everybody connect and learn the skills. And learning is two parts to that. E-learning is a piece of the puzzle, and real coaching with human interaction is the second piece of the puzzle. We enable both of those components in the platform, and we integrate with all learning management platforms. But without that, I want to tell a story about one of our customers, a very large financial services firm. And they had 5 years of declining employee engagement scores year after year. And the CEO said, we need to change the curve here. After 5 years of declining scores, they had done everything possible, and we said, why don't you just try a peer coaching effort? And we took a small team to try that. It was very, very effective, and today we continue to work with that company and grow our business with them. But the thing that was gratifying for the efforts we put in was the feedback from the ERGs. Every report, every dashboard was visible to non-managers as well as for executives. By flattening the process, by flattening the hierarchies and getting people to connect with each other and disconnecting the process from your performance reviews, you were able to make it work. And so when I talk about D&I, that's what I want to share with each one of you. You get it out of your current process, and really when you enable people to work with each other, you'll find a change in culture.
Yeah.
Let me get short answers from each of you on this. What are your metrics for measuring inclusivity? Steve, what are your metrics?
We do that a lot. So it goes everywhere from broadly across the organization. What does it look like as far as hiring, discipline, termination, promotions, and then drilling down to specific departments. What does that look like in that department? And also, what challenges do we have as far as employee retention and discipline, as far as are we singling out people of a certain protected class, race, gender, and so on.
I see. And what do you add to that, Denise? That's really digging down to some specifics. You're doing that?
Yes, we submit to our employees People Pulse survey twice a year, and there is a specific section on inclusion. It's 6 questions, and we're able to aggregate that data down to ethnicity, job code, department, and look for the hot spots. And then from there, start looking at the comments, and that gives us clues on how we create plans to improve.
Yeah, there's comments as well. That's effective. Mm-hmm. What are your metrics?
Similar. There's 3 pillars we look at. So we look at workforce, workplace, and marketplace. And there's data that we capture from each of those pillars. So in the workforce, it's from our HR team, along with workplace from our HR and learning and development team. And then the marketplace information is really capturing information from our line of business leaders and how we show up in the market, from our products and services to how we treat individuals who walk into our branches. So there's lots of data points that we capture from those 3 priorities.
Madhukar?
So we're still very small, so I'm not put in a framework of very large number of metrics, but we're looking at foundational metrics around engagement. What is the network within the company? How dense is that network? How engaged are people within the company? I'm looking at that. Obviously, for me, attrition, both internal and external attrition, is a big proxy for the sort of the the culture within the groups. And so I do keep an eye on that, but for our customers, it is about engagement and internal attrition and external attrition. They are tangible metrics to work on, but they also reflect on the process and the culture, and they can see improvements by doing certain things deliberately. And so we kind of talk about those metrics.
Cassandra, just a short one.
Yeah.
You mentioned the key groups. I didn't get the phrase you had.
KeyBank.
KeyBank. How do they create connections across those groups so that they're reaching all the other groups?
Well, we have 115 chapters, 12 different ERGs, and it's a lot of collaboration amongst the groups. We're actually going to be rolling out a tool that will allow improved communication around different things that are happening around different markets, and I bring together our national ERG leaders on a monthly basis, and we share best practices and talk about what's working, what's not, and they all have we have 4 specific priorities from our ERGs: recruitment and retention, professional development, community engagement, and business innovation. So when they build their annual strategies, their initiatives, activities, programming is always aligned with those 4 priorities in mind.
Across the whole
across the organization.
I
And
see.
it aligns with our overall DEI strategy as well.
All right, last question for you. Just sort of, maybe this is more speculative, maybe not. So how has Zoom, how has out-of-office work helped you develop tools or find new and innovative ways to identify talented people who might have been marginalized or might have been in the shadows in some way? Steve?
That's a great question. So for the city of Seattle, we have done more outreach as far as the talent acquisition teams. So that means that we can use these virtual platforms to find more people, to invite them to virtual town halls and opportunities like that. So, and Zoom virtual interviewing has become normal, more normal. So you're able to use that as well, instead of having people take time to come across the city or have to cut out an entire day just for one interview. So that's a quick answer to that.
Mm-hmm. So at KP, we found that it's been very beneficial using Zoom to be able. We're just launching. We did starting last year, hosting our own events as opposed to like larger job fairs. We're having our own events, and doing that, we're able to hone in on the candidates that apply and give them a personal space to be able to connect with us. And so that's given us a more intimate opportunity to speak to the candidate where in the larger scheme we can't. Another benefit in being able to attract more diverse candidates is being on Zoom. It's allowed us to have more of a diverse panel. And that panel is made possible by Zoom because they don't have to travel from another location to be there for the interview. So we're able to tap into talent all over Kaiser's network to be able to engage with them and answer their questions.
Be short.
I try. Okay. The only thing I would add is just more community engagement. So being more intentional and working with professional associations like National Black MBA, local community organizations and partners. We do a lot of investment in the community with partners here and across our footprint. And so that's been a great way to just make people aware of KeyBank, not necessarily being intentional in career opportunities, but that always seems to come up. Sorry.
All right. Mm-hmm. That was good. We ended on time. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.